When a man who was mocked for his skin color turned out to be a doctor, the entire plane fell silent, except for the sound of lessons being learned. The boarding process was chaotic, as it often is on crowded flights. Passengers shuffled down the narrow aisle, juggling carry-ons and searching for their assigned seats. Among them was a young man dressed in a crisp navy blue suit, his leather bag slung over one shoulder. He moved with quiet confidence, his presence unassuming yet dignified. To the casual observer, he appeared to be just another traveler, perhaps heading to an important meeting or visiting family. What no one knew, neither the passengers nor the readers, was that this man carried more than just his belongings. He carried a purpose far greater than anyone could have anticipated. As he approached his seat in economy class, a middle-aged woman seated by the window glanced up at him with visible disdain. Her lips curled into a sneer as she muttered under her breath, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Of course they put you here." The remark hung in the air like smoke, sharp and suffocating. The man paused briefly, his dark eyes meeting hers for a fleeting moment before he offered a polite smile and slid past her to take his seat beside the aisle. The tension was palpable, but he chose not to engage. Instead, he settled into his chair, adjusting his tie and pulling out a book from his bag. The title, partially obscured by his hand, read something about medicine, a clue unnoticed by those around him. As the plane taxied toward the runway, the woman continued her subtle campaign of hostility, making snide comments about how certain people didn't belong in nice places and casting pointed glances in his direction. Other passengers exchanged uneasy looks, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats, while others avoided eye contact altogether. For now, the man remained silent, his expression calm but resolute. Yet beneath the surface, a storm brewed, not of anger, but of resolve. This wasn't the first time he'd faced such treatment, and he knew it wouldn't be the last. But today, something felt different. Today, he sensed that the universe had plans neither he nor the woman beside him could foresee. As the plane ascended into the sky, the woman's behavior grew bolder, emboldened by the lack of intervention from those around her. She leaned closer to the man, her voice dripping with condescension. "You know," she began, her tone deliberately loud, "people like you should really think twice before taking up space where you're not wanted." Her words were met with scattered murmurs of discomfort from nearby passengers, but no one dared to speak up. The man clenched his jaw ever so slightly, his fingers tightening around the edge of his book. Still, he said nothing, choosing instead to focus on the pages in front of him as if they held the answers to the turbulence brewing around him. The atmosphere on the plane shifted subtly, but unmistakably. A few passengers exchanged guilty glances, torn between discomfort and reluctance to intervene. Others buried themselves in their phones or pretended to sleep, avoiding any confrontation. One man in the row ahead audibly sighed, muttering, "Not this again," before turning away. It was clear that everyone had heard the remarks, yet silence reigned, a collective failure to stand against the rising tide of prejudice. For the young man, the isolation was suffocating. Each word from the woman's mouth felt like a weight pressing down on him, a reminder of the countless times he had been made to feel invisible because of the color of his skin. Yet, amidst the sting of her words, he noticed something else, the fear in her eyes. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a flicker of insecurity masked by arrogance. He realized then that her cruelty stemmed not from strength, but from weakness. Determined not to let her actions define the journey, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook. Flipping through its pages, he began jotting down observations. The way the flight attendants hesitated when addressing her, the nervous laughter from a teenager 2 rows back, the whispered apologies from an elderly couple who caught his eye. These moments, though fleeting, painted a picture of a system that allowed such behavior to thrive unchecked. His thoughts drifted to the countless stories he had heard from friends and colleagues, stories of discrimination disguised as ignorance, of lives derailed by hate. He thought of his own mother, who had taught him to rise above adversity with grace and dignity. Her voice echoed in his mind, Asterisk, sometimes the best revenge is proving them wrong. Asterisk, with renewed resolve, he closed the notebook and tucked it back into his bag. For now, he would endure. But deep down, he knew this encounter was far from over. Midway through the flight, the atmosphere on the plane shifted dramatically. The hum of conversation and the occasional rustle of in-flight magazines were interrupted by a sudden commotion. The woman who had spent much of the journey hurling insults now clutched her chest, her face pale and contorted with pain. Her earlier bravado dissolved into panic as she gasped for air, her breathing shallow and erratic. "Help! Someone help me!" she cried, her voice trembling with fear. The cabin erupted into chaos. Passengers craned their necks to see what was happening, while others froze in shock. Flight attendants rushed to her side, their calm professionalism masking the urgency of the situation. "Is there a doctor on board?" One of them called out, her voice cutting through the murmurs of concern. For a moment, no one responded. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the earlier cacophony of judgment and indifference. Then, from his seat, the young man rose quietly. He moved with purpose, his earlier composure replaced by an air of authority. Pushing past the crowd that had gathered around the woman's seat, he knelt beside her, his eyes scanning her face and posture. "I'm a doctor," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. The flight attendants stepped back slightly, granting him space to assess the situation. Without hesitation, he began asking questions. "Do you have any history of heart problems? Are you feeling pain anywhere else?" His tone was calm but commanding, instantly putting the woman at ease, or as much ease as her condition allowed. She nodded weakly, clutching her chest tighter. I think it's my heart," she managed to whisper, tears streaming down her face. The young man wasted no time. He instructed the flight attendants to retrieve the onboard medical kit and directed another passenger to fetch a blanket. As they worked together, his hands moved with precision, checking her pulse and administering medication from the kit. He spoke softly to her, reassuring her that she was in good hands. "You're going to be okay," he said, his voice laced with empathy. The other passengers watched in stunned silence, their earlier apathy replaced by awe. Some whispered among themselves, piecing together the irony of the situation. The same man who had been subjected to ridicule was now saving the life of the very person who had mocked him. It was a twist none of them could have anticipated, and it left an indelible mark on everyone present. As the woman's breathing gradually stabilized, the tension in the cabin began to ease. The flight attendants exchanged grateful glances, their relief palpable. The young man remained focused, monitoring her condition closely until he was certain she was out of immediate danger. Only then did he step back, allowing the crew to take over. The transformation in the woman's demeanor was profound. Gone was the arrogance and hostility. In its place was vulnerability and gratitude. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and disbelief. For the first time, she saw him not as a target for her prejudice, but as a human being and a hero. When the plane finally touched down, the mood among the passengers was somber yet reflective. As they disembarked, the young man lingered near the exit, his presence commanding attention without demanding it. When the last of the passengers had gathered around him, he cleared his throat and began to speak. "Today, we experience something that happens far too often, not just on planes, but in our schools, workplaces, and communities," he began, his voice resonating with quiet authority. "We witnessed hate and prejudice play out in real time, and we also saw how quickly those things can spiral into harm for everyone involved." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "But today, we also saw something else: humanity. We saw what happens when we choose to rise above anger and act with compassion, even toward those who don't deserve it. That's the kind of world I want to live in, a world where we see each other as people first, not stereotypes or assumptions." His gaze swept across the crowd, meeting the eyes of each passenger. "To those of you who stayed silent while I was harassed, I ask you this: what will you do the next time you witness injustice? Will you stand by and let it happen, or will you speak up? Silence is complicity, and complicity allows hate to thrive. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some lowering their heads in shame while others nodded in agreement. The woman who had insulted him stood nearby, her face flushed with embarrassment. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. Instead, she simply bowed her head, acknowledging the lesson she had learned. The young man concluded with a message of hope. Change starts with us, with every decision we make to treat others with kindness and respect. Let today be the day you choose to make a difference. As he turned to leave, applause broke out spontaneously, filling the terminal with a sense of unity and resolve. The passengers dispersed, each carrying with them not just their luggage, but a renewed commitment to doing better. In the days that followed, the incident on the flight became a catalyst for change, not just for those who had been present, but for countless others who heard about it. News of the young doctor's actions spread quickly, thanks to social media posts from passengers and coverage by local news outlets. Videos captured discreetly during the emergency showed his calm demeanor and decisive actions, while interviews with fellow travelers highlighted the emotional impact of his words after landing. The story resonated deeply, sparking conversations about racism, bystander responsibility, and the power of compassion in unexpected places. For the woman who had hurled insults, the experience was transformative. She later reached out to the airline to express her gratitude, asking if she could contact the doctor personally. When they connected over a video call, she began by apologizing profusely, tears streaming down her face. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I want you to know how sorry I am for everything. You didn't deserve what I said, and I'll carry the shame of my actions for the rest of my life." To her surprise, the young man responded with grace. "Thank you for your apology," he said gently. "It takes courage to admit when we're wrong, and I appreciate your honesty. My hope is that this experience will inspire you to see people differently, not as labels or stereotypes, but as individuals worthy of respect." Their conversation marked the beginning of her personal journey toward growth. She joined community workshops focused on racial sensitivity and volunteered at organizations promoting inclusivity. Though she knew she couldn't undo the harm she had caused, she committed herself to being part of the solution, a testament to the profound impact one act of kindness can have. The ripple effect extended far beyond her. Inspired by the story, several passengers took action in their own lives. One man, who had remained silent during the harassment, began speaking up against discriminatory behavior at work, becoming an advocate for diversity training within his company. A teenage girl wrote an essay about the incident for her school newspaper, urging her peers to stand against prejudice. Even the flight attendants involved shared the story with colleagues, emphasizing the importance of recognizing implicit biases in customer service. As for the young doctor, his decision to rise above hatred and respond with empathy earned him widespread admiration. Letters poured in from people around the world, thanking him for reminding them of the strength found in forgiveness and the importance of leading by example. He became a symbol of resilience and hope, not because he sought recognition, but because his actions embodied the values so many aspired to live by. Weeks later, the young doctor sat in a quiet cafe, reflecting on the events that had unfolded. The memory of the flight still lingered vividly in his mind. The hostility, the fear, the redemption, but it no longer weighed heavily on him. Instead, it filled him with a sense of purpose. He realized that his role wasn't just to heal physical ailments, but to mend the fractures in humanity wherever he encountered them. He thought about the passengers, each carrying their own burdens and biases, yet united by a shared moment of reckoning. He thought about the woman who had insulted him, now working to unlearn years of ingrained prejudice. And he thought about himself, the boy who had grown up hearing whispers of doubt and derision, only to emerge as someone capable of inspiring change. That evening, he penned a message on his blog, addressing anyone who might stumble across it. Every day, we are given opportunities to choose love over hate, understanding over judgment, action over silence. These choices may seem small, but together they shape the world we live in. To my brothers and sisters who face discrimination daily, know this: your worth is immeasurable and your voices matter. Do not let anyone dim your light. And to those who witness injustice, remember that your silence speaks volumes. Speak up, stand tall, and be the change you wish to see. His words resonated deeply, shared thousands of times across platforms, and translated into multiple languages. They served as a rallying cry for marginalized communities and a wake-up call for allies. For Black people everywhere, his story was a powerful reminder of their resilience and potential to transform even the darkest moments into triumphs. When asked in an interview why he chose to save the woman who had treated him so cruelly, he smiled softly and replied, "Because hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." If we truly want a better world, we must start by showing compassion, even to those who least deserve it. As the sun set outside the cafe window, casting golden hues across the room, the young doctor felt a profound sense of peace. The scars of racism would always exist, but so too would the stories of courage and unity that rose to meet them. And in those stories lay the promise of a brighter future, a future shaped by the collective efforts of ordinary people choosing to do extraordinary things. Have you ever experienced a moment where someone unfairly judged you based on appearance? Share your experience in the comments. If you enjoyed this and want more content on inspiring Black stories channel like this, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and remember, real courage is not fearing the consequences, but prioritizing justice over comfort.